John, thank you. And thank you everyone for your time today. And yes, I realize that my normal tribe of people are geeks. And so my job today is to explain what I do in a way that hopefully inspires all of you to see a possibility that you may not have realized exists right before us. With that, shall I get started? Are you ready? Got a couple of people smiling. Let's do it. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, the host disabled participant screen sharing. If you could share my screen or allow me to share my screen, I could go through a deck I've prepared,
Yep,
and then
should
we
be
can
good to go right
great.
now.
Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Let's do it. So we're going to talk about how giving youth money can save our bureaucracy. We tell our youth that knowledge is power, but they see that power comes from money. And we tell our youth to get involved, but they can't vote. How can anything change if so few people control so much money? And how can you make a change if you can't vote? Well, power may come from money, but change comes from people. What we're building is the world's first platform for democratic financial decision-making in schools. How? We give students a real money budget, not a fake budget, a real money budget. And we support them as they decide how to invest it. They make real change happen in their school with real money. They harness money power. Okay, now for the normal presentation. That was the part that hopefully gets your attention and says, okay, what's really going on here? What's happening? Well, a little bit about me. I'm a husband and father, 4 wonderful kids, live in Sunnyvale, California. I am a serial entrepreneur, and I'm also a philanthropist. I started a nonprofit, Every Voice Engaged Foundation, that helps organizations and cities, and mostly in the public sector, solve wicked problems through collaborative techniques. If anyone on the call is familiar with an organization, the Kettering Foundation, and their approach to deliberative decision-making, I built a software platform in partnership with Kettering to bring deliberative decision-making at scale. I'm known in the agile software development movement, and these are the 2 of the main organizations there. And I've written 4 books with really long titles, and sometimes 1 or 2 of them sells. So who are we? Well, First Root is a benefit corp that uses participatory budgeting to teach kids financial literacy and address the harmful effects of economic inequality. And this is a democratic process. And it's actually a structured process with 5 distinct phases. In the first phase, when a school says we want to do PB, and participatory budgeting is an absolute mouthful, so we just say PB. Now, we bring the kids in and we talk about, well, what's the theme? Is it about school safety? Is it about preparing for college? Who should be involved? Is it all the students? Is it a subset of the students? The students then create proposals. They refine those proposals into specific things that can be implemented. They vote on those proposals, and then they're funded or implemented. And that process allows us, through a very concrete lens, to teach essential life skills. One essential life skill that this teaches is financial literacy. Can I afford this? And what's the implications of this purchase? It teaches civics. It helps the children move from a me thinking to a we thinking. It also, for those of you on the phone call that might be familiar with a problem-solving technique known as design thinking. Design thinking emphasizes understanding the problem, creating lots of opportunities to solve it, divergent thinking, critically assessing those ideas, and then converging on something that you want to take action against. And these things also directly correlate to what the United Nations has called the 4 C's of the 21st century curriculum: creativity, communication, critical thinking, and collaboration. And what I add to the United Nations list is I add the 5th C of civics. And I think one of the things that is a really distressing statistic is in 2011, Tufts University did a study and found that 24% of millennials think that democracy is a bad or a very bad way to run a country. I'll come back to that. Now, why am I so motivated to do this? If I'm as an author, I read a lot. And one of the things I always tell my kids is leaders are readers. And if you want to read a book that will really profoundly impact how you think and see the world, I would invite you to read the book, The Spirit Level, down here. And what these authors did was they looked at a whole host of social and health factors, from teenage births to obesity to drug and alcohol addiction. And they found that the more unequal the society, the worse it performs on these index of health and social problems. What's really shocking is that it actually doesn't matter if you're rich or poor in that society, meaning a rich person in America is likely to score lower than a poor person in the Netherlands or the Nordic countries. So this affects both all classes, and it's pretty potent in its impact. The civics angle for me is that we can see around the world, the percentage of people who say it is essential to live in a democracy is plummeting. And we're seeing this polarization emerge that is really profoundly negative. And I want to start by saying, I actually don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, and I don't need to know. What I do want is I want civic engagement, because it doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican if we lose engagement. And we can start to see that there's a pretty strong dividing line between the countries that are not satisfied with their democracies and the impact that it's having around the world. So how do we do this? I mean, why would we do participatory budgeting, and why does this matter? Well, first, PB is already working in hundreds of schools, and I'm giving you a very small set of schools here, some that are local to where I live. But what you start to realize as an adult, and I know that Rotarians know this because of many things that you do with youth, but the first thing is we can trust our kids. We can support them, and they make good and thoughtful choices. The second is that this movement is actually growing. In New York State is now, they are requiring that all comprehensive support and improvement schools, the schools that need the most help, they're actually required to put in $2,000 into a PB program. In the Phoenix Union High School District, they canceled their school resource officer program, which is a police officer in the school to try and improve safety, to actually engage the community about improving safety. And now, last year, New York City released an entire curriculum where they're using the lens of participation and the lens of participatory budgeting to promote civics. Now, how much money do we give the youth? And on average, it's about 2,000 to 10,000. And the real answer is we want to give enough money to the kids so that it's meaningful, but not so much money that parents are going to step in and try and control the process. And that money can come from the principals, it can come from the PTAs. We're doing a project right now at First Root in partnership with Salesforce, who's a big education supporter, in their corporate social responsibility program. So we think that there's a lot of opportunity to get money into the hands of the kids, and it doesn't have to be a tremendously large amount of money. Now, how does it actually work? Well, a teacher or a school administrator, they create an account on our platform, they configure the program, Then First Root guides the students through the entire process. And then the teacher or the school purchases those student-funded proposals so they can see the choices in action and they can see the effects of democracy. And I want to point out that this doesn't mean that every single thing the kids pick will be correct or perfect. Quite literally, I still make mistakes. Sometimes I'll buy something that I think I want and it maybe doesn't turn out. And I would rather have those youth experience this in school where we can talk about the impact of the choice and see the results and see those impacts before we kick them out on their own and in the wild. Now, in general, we advocate and we recommend to the schools and the students that they go with capital expenses, things that can be tangibly purchased and the students can see relatively quickly. Operating expenses can have a problem because it can encumber a school to a future expense that they may not want to be able to afford. This is some screenshots of what our app looks like. We've taken a lot of design cues and we've designed it with a lot of students to make sure it matches interaction models that they're comfortable with. So we're taking some cues, although I'm not a large fan of social media, we're taking some of the cues of how information is organized in social media to make it engaging, light, fun, incredibly easy to use. We've localized the app into many, many languages so that students see this in their native language. We've worked really hard to make sure it works on any device that the student has. So if they don't have a smartphone, if they have a Chromebook or a Mac or a PC, if any device that they're using, the software will work for them. Now, civic engagement is built into First Root. And one of the things that this doesn't exist yet, but we're building towards is that you can have multiple schools run their participatory budgeting programs together. And my vision for the company is if I walk up to a single classroom and I say, hey, 25 kids in this classroom, you've got $10. Well, that's $250 and I can go through an educational experience. If I walk up to that school and I give that school $10,000, well, now I've engaged the school and $10,000 is a pretty meaningful amount of money. If I go into the city or the school district where my kids go to school, we've got 7 schools and 7 high schools in the school district. Well, now I'm at $70,000. That's a pretty meaningful number. In California alone, there are 3,200 high schools. If I gave every school $10,000 and supported them through the right kind of software, those kids have access to $30 million directly under their control that they can start to apply to the elements of change that they think are most important. And there's an undeniable correlate between how money is spent and how it affects our societies. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and it was very gracious for John to talk about my corporate history. And I founded my last company to bring participatory budgeting solutions and collaborative ways of decision into large enterprises. But what happened was in 2012, I fell into doing things philanthropically. And with a friend of mine, Martha Amram, we created a nonprofit. And we've helped cities and schools administer more than $1 billion using these techniques. My company was indeed acquired in 2019, and I've decided that my next company, First Root, is now a benefit corporation, kind of like Patagonia, but it's focused on bringing this into schools. Now, participatory budgeting, a few final things. It's endorsed by the United Nations, and you can see that the United Nations has mapped participatory budgeting into 7 of the 17 SDGs. And I think that participatory budgeting could be a powerful way for our organizations to partner. I'm amazed and really excited about the Interact and the Rotary sponsorship of Interact. And I love the 4-way test. I'm working on a blog post because I think the 4-way test is so powerful and compelling. But when you look at what participatory budgeting can do both within a school and across communities in terms of promoting peace, giving kids a direct voice in education, looking at the impact of decision-making in local economies, and also having those kids the ability for them to choose about how they want to interact with the environment. There's a lot of good stuff here. And so now I'm going to turn it over to a discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to be respectful of time. What I always tell people on these kinds of situations is if you are kind enough to put something as a question into the chat, I guarantee you that I will answer every question you have, even if we run out of time. And I will email those questions and answers to John when we're done. So you can load, I mean, every person could load up a question. I could maybe only get some of them answered, but I promise my commitment to you would be, I will give you an answer to every question you have.
Hey, Luke, I'll open up with a question real quick, or a request of you. Back in, I'm wearing my Agile Alliance shirt. Back at the Agile Alliance in 2015, you told a little bit of a story about how San Jose had used it. I believe it was San Jose, California, had used participatory budgeting to.
Sure.
Could you just very quickly, a minute or so, 2 minutes, summarize that story, because that was very compelling to me.
Sure. Give me a sec on that one, because a picture can do an amazing set of answers to that. So give me one quick sec. Had I known you were going to ask that, I would have loaded it up. So let me give to an answer to John's question is one of the things that we've done in San Jose is we've engaged hundreds of citizens to engage in this process. So let me show you a screen of what it looks like. Am I presenting okay again?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so let's start by looking first. Let's talk about human collaborative behavior. Humans do not collaborate in large groups. It's not how we're cognitively and biologically designed. We are designed to collaborate in small tribal structures of roughly 4 to 8 people. So you can see we preserve that structure. Every person that you see in this photo wearing a gray shirt is a volunteer facilitator. These are ordinary residents in San Jose that are debating what to do if we were to raise a sales tax. How would we spend that money? The facilitators are responsible for guiding people into a good outcome. The subject matter experts, such as Eddie Garcia, the chief of police, are providing the technical question or the technical answers to technical questions. And we also have an online component, and you can it's really hard to see, but the facilitator here is Ulf. I have a global network of facilitators, and Ulf is actually from Sweden. I kid you not, we have a Swedish person facilitating an American democratic process. And what we include is in-person and online, and we're starting to able to tease out some of those differences and benefits of when we go online and benefits of in-person. So what we were able to do is we were able to provide data to the city on how to manage a sales increase. So I'll stop there, but you know, some of the things that we, you know, one of the more profound stories from that is I remember when I first started doing my work in San Jose, a woman at the end of the event, we have a retrospective about how it went, and a woman grabbed the microphone and she said, you know, I've come to these budget feedback sessions every year and they're always the same. The leaders of the city make a PowerPoint presentation, they ask us a few questions, and there's no real engagement. And then she started to tear up and she said, this was the first time I had the same amount of money as everyone else at the table. And this is a profound statement. This is a woman who no longer believes that her vote matters because she sees that money influences the decisions. And when she's at a table where everyone at the table has an equal portion of the funds and is collaborating about how to invest it, this is profound. And it's hard to explain the emotional resonance that creates in people. It's also one of the things where sometimes it's actually better to go online than to be in person, because when we go in person, no matter who we are, we all have bias. And it's hard to train yourself to manage and control your bias, no matter who you are. It's hard. You can get good at it, but you can't completely eliminate it, because we're all human. But when we go online and when we do things like turn off the video, we can focus instead on other attributes of people that are really important in terms of what they're advocating and why they're advocating for it. So John, that was kind of a long answer to your question, but this is the kind of work that I've been doing for more than a decade. And now I'm completely focusing on what I think is kind of one of the more important futures, which is the future of our democracy through the lens of how we're engaging with our youth.
Okay, thank you. Looks like you got a couple of questions. Go ahead, Jen.
I have a comment, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. It's intriguing. I've often thought that when I file my tax return, if I had a checklist of things that I could choose for my taxes to be allocated to, that I, as a US citizen, might have more buy-in to the direction of our country. So this reminds me of that. Of course, it's not very practical to think that we would have the opportunity. I guess we do that through voting and choosing our elected officials and politicians who make those decisions. But I've often wondered what it would look like if taxpayers had the opportunity to literally check the boxes on things that matter and how that would play out. So this reminds me of that sort of thinking in terms of getting the civil engagement and the buy-in of the folks who are helping to make those decisions. So
Julia, I think let me build on this, right? One of the things we talk about in the Agile community is one of our favorite phrases is yes and, right? So yes to your point, and let's talk about how that might happen. One of the things I've learned over the decade plus that I've been working on this with ordinary citizens is that ordinary citizens want to have a portion of the budget under their control. But when you really sit down and just have conversations with people, we all recognize that there are certain choices that require true technical expertise, meaning y'all don't want me to plan your sewage system, and y'all don't want me to plan your pipes and power or the asphalt that we use on the roads. I am not technically competent to do that. But there is a portion of the budget that we do want to interact with. And so when I look at the budget, right, I kind of think of budgets in thirds, right? There's a third of and not in dollar amounts, but just conceptual buckets, right? There's 3 buckets. One bucket is decisions that we really want technical, that are technical in nature, and we would benefit from true technical leaders taking, a stronger voice in those. The second bucket are the existential questions that prevent what I call pitchfork politics, meaning, if someone walks up and says, a city doesn't need lawyers or a city doesn't need HR, well, that's not true, right? We need permits, and permits require adjudication, and we do need lawyers doing their job, and we do need HR, and it's the other bucket that has some choice on it, and this is the maddening part of being an American, right? We just think that if we didn't invent it, it's not the coolest thing. Participatory budgeting was invented in Porto Alegre, Brazil in 1989, and it's used in many other places around the world. Paris has $100 million that they donate that they give to their citizens. The Scottish government allocates 1% of the government's money to citizen-led participatory budgeting. And we have a choice as a society, right? Do we want to use our capabilities in technology to create Facebook, or do we want to use our technologies to create collaboration platforms that would enable Julia to do exactly what you said? And those are the platforms I build, and I know how to build, right? Is because I don't want 100% of my budget that I pay in taxes to be controlled by citizens, but I want some of it to be controlled. And we have everything we need to make that vision a reality. So that's the vision. And my secret plan, Julia, is that when all of these kids graduate, they're going to demand this because they experienced it in school. Why am I not allowed to contribute at work, right? I mean, how many times at work is the budget held by, 5 druids who control what's going on? And, but I've transformed budgeting processes at places like BMW, where suddenly you can have hundreds of leaders in BMW from every place they do business in the world, collaborating in real time about what the budget is. So I'm with you, Julia. That's what I want too. I just think that the national government is not at a place where they might want to do this, but state and local budgets, governments actually are, and schools are for sure doing this. I'm with you 100%.
Okay. There was a request from Ben Rotherman. Can you reiterate where the money comes from for the schools?
Hi, yeah, Ben. It's actually pretty simple. The money, what we find is most principals have a reasonable discretionary funds budget. So the first place that we ask for money for a PB program is somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 from the principal's discretionary fund. The next place is the PTA or PTSA. And what we often find in a PTA is they literally don't know what to do with the money they raise sometimes. And so their go-to is, oh, we'll just give it to the teachers. And so we've gone to PTAs and they've said, what a great idea. Let's let the kids decide with some of the money. And that's been really gratifying. And then I think the last one for me that I think is a big opportunity is creating partnerships with other like-minded organizations or with the corporate social responsibility programs of companies like Facebook or other companies. But those are the 3 main sources of the funds.
Fantastic. There was also a request from Jonathan Snowden to re-show the list of countries not satisfied with government democracy. Would you mind sharing your slides with us, and I'll send them out, and that way Jonathan can look at it to his heart's content?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll make sure that you get a copy of the slides for sure.
Okay. As soon as I get them, I will send them out to the entire membership.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is being recorded, so it will be.
Oh, great. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hi, recording. So I'll ask every one of the Rotarians, right? Does it align with, if you look at this process, do you get the right answers to the 4 critical questions? I think we do.
Easier in a room.
Oh, of course. Right. I mean, it's the wrong dynamic for, any other questions? I'm like I said, I want to be respectful of people's times. We've got where the money comes from, display the list of countries. Come on, don't you want to stump me? Don't you want to throw something like really hard at me? How do the kids react to this? It depends on the culture. In certain cultures, the kids are a little reticent. For example, in Native American Indians, it can be perceived as a sign of disrespect to the elders to not let them make certain decisions. But mostly kids love it. I mean, the kids love it. They really do. And in fact, we're building in social media sharing. And as we work with the kids more, we're finding more opportunities to support them. Like, hey, could I use my work here as part of my college application? Or, hey, I can't do community service in the time of COVID. Can we use this for community service credit for my graduation requirements in some of the high schools that have community service graduation requirements? And the answer, of course, is yes. So the kids like it. How does the government react to this? Well, it depends. Jonathan, if you could take yourself off mute, I'd love to have a little bit of clarification on government. Do you mean like the school district as government, or do you mean the city or the national government?
To the national government.
Well, the national government, I haven't even tried, because like I said, I have a secret plan, but the secret plan is not a frontal attack on the national government. It's just not going to work.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't talking about attacking them. I was just about.
I've gone to Washington. I've introduced this to various people in like the Wilson Center for Democracy, and I've talked to Congress, members of Congress. They're just not interested in, their perspective is what kind of related to what Julia said. We have a representational democracy. You elected me. I control the money. Nah, it's not quite right. So now some government officials are astonishingly open to this, like Mayor Reed and Mayor Liccardo, after him in San Jose, California. They were, when I started working with them, they were 100 million in debt, and they were desperate for a way to properly engage citizens. And how do we make the cuts to get out of it? So I think that local government officials are considerably more supportive than the national government. And I know we all want to support and fix the national government. I get it. I want to do that too. But I've made my run at Congress. I've made my run in a couple of presentations in Washington, and it wasn't interesting. So I'm taking a more broad-based, potentially longer-term solution.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Rotary.
I
Like,
would agree.
you guys don't do short things.
Attack
You guys
isn't the
do
right
big
way
things.
at all. It's a slow osmosis.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one. Are you getting pushback from either political party, and do you have any support from those in Washington? I have found that people who care about democracy first support this. People who care about a party first sometimes are less supportive. So, but I would say that progressive, in the sense of not liberal, but progressive people who care about democracy, whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, they do care about the future of civics, and we are a republic, right? I mean, I'm not trying to change the structure of our democracy, or say one person gets more votes or you don't get a vote. Of course, I am trying to change the level of engagement, and as Julia talked about, a portion of our funds, right, taught, using this to teach civics and the civics mindset and the civics practice. To me, that's what I'm after.
Fantastic. I'll share your contact information in that as well. They can reach you at your email address with any questions.
Yes, please. I really, like I said, I really appreciate your time and your willingness to listen to this, or and if it just isn't your cup of tea, or if this doesn't sound like a good idea, that's okay too, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways that we're going to come together to make advances. This is what I have found to be remarkable.